Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of the War Doctor Begins Warbringer, which is the second Big Finish War Doctor box set in the War Doctor Begins range, and the 6th War Doctor audio series overall. First of all, a few apologies to my audience. I initially was going to review this back in January, February, maybe March, depending when I listened to the series a second time, because I would listen to it first and then give it a second listening before doing the review, but I never got round to doing that, listening it to a second time until the start of September. So that's where we are at time recording, and now we're all getting this review now. Side note, I have also heard box set 3 of the War Doctor Begins range of Battlegrounds once. I will give it a second listening before reviewing that, and that review should hopefully come out this time next month. Hopefully, sticking to these monthly releases of the War Doctor Begins box sets. Well, when they were monthly last year. So apologies for the delay in the review of this box set from February-March to January, February, March to September of 2022. But hopefully I won't take as long with the 4th box set. Also, I have to correct myself for calling this Warmongerer in the last review. It's actually Warbringer. So apologies about that. So the basic series arc of this story is quite interesting. I think this is quite an interesting series. So we see the Doctor, the War Doctor, played once again by Jonathan Carley, along with a returning Veclin, played by Beth Chalmers, and a new character called Case, played by Ajazad Awad. I really hope I pronounced that right. They land a big giant Dalek craft, some sort of factory thing, factory class ship onto a planet, and well, that they're about to do that, but they manage to get off the ship and arrive on the planet a day earlier, time travel. And basically the Doctor is trying to save the population of the planet before the ship crashes in and destroys all life on the planet. Veclin knows it's a complete waste of time, and that's not the mission. And on top of all of that, Case is actually a part converted new type of Dalek robot machine thing, and there's a squad of Daleks already on the planet as part of another operation that they're doing. Oh, and that's not to mention that the species on the planet are kind of have a bit of a war with each other. They like to fight each other. It's kind of their things to do. They enjoy it. It's basically a bit like if two opposing factions of the Sontarans did it and they treated it like a game. A bit like a bit like Paradise Towers, where the tribes were kind of just messing around with each other, playing a game of trying to annihilate each other, except this time it's actual war. So we kind of got that as well. And what's interesting about this series is that episode 3 actually takes place before the other two. It's kind of told as a story to Case because she's forgotten about what happened there. So they have to try and basically the Doctor's kind of recalling the events of that story, and it basically acts like a prequel to the other 2 episodes. In a way, it's pretty interesting. So you got episode 1, and 2 kind of serves like a second half to that story, and then episode 3 serves as a introduction, how it all began, what led into these events. And in my opinion, these stories are all really good. This is probably the most consecutively good box set so far, besides I think maybe even more so than box set 4 of the original series run with John Hurt's Doctor. I think this is the most consistent series. It's consistently good. I don't think there's the extremely amazing story in here, but I think it's a consistently great series. Really enjoyable. The first story we have is called Consequences, written by Timothy X. Attack. And it's a really good story of the characters just landing on the planet a day before the ship they were on crashes. Case has absolutely no idea what's going on. She has no memory of who she was, what she was, and Veclin is very apprehensive towards her. And over the course of the story, they have to try and see what's going on. The Doctor's trying to save the population. Case is trying to find him. Veclin is trying to find him, and Case is kind of just tagging along. They meet up with this other character, a really fun character. What was her name? Let me see. Cast list. She was really fun. Inasa. Inasa was a really fun character in this episode. It's a shame she wasn't in any more episodes for story purposes. But yeah, Anasa was a pretty fun character, and I really enjoyed her interactions with the Doctor and then with Veclin and Case. Also, Angela Bruce appears in this story as a major guest star, as a war-heavy woman with an American accent, as well as the leader of one of the two tribes. And she's really, really great in both roles, especially the worn-out, heavy woman who's seen it all through battle and has an American accent. Her character. My only kind of regret is that her whatever Veclin does to her happens off screen, and we don't get to hear her final moments in the story, and she doesn't pop up again. So that's a bit of a shame. Speaking of fun characters, we also got the Belarus, I think it is. Yeah, Bellas, the Princeps. Who's really good as well. He's a great character and really fun. And actor John Banks has a great role with him. And also the other new character introduced in episode 2. Is it Farron? I think it might be Farron. Yeah, I think Farron's also a pretty fun character for episode 2. So Anasa and one of Angela Bruce's character, the Insepitant Mother, and form one of these species. And the other is Princeps and Farron. And it's interesting seeing these two kind of fighting with each other, as well as also having these beliefs of the Warbringer, which the Doctor plays with a bit to try and get them to listen to him and try to save them. Eventually, he kind of gets ousted because he doesn't kill the Insipidant Mother, and even though Veclin tries to make him look like the Warbringer by doing it herself, they are not believed. But eventually, the crashing spaceship tries to. Comes crashing down almost upon them. Moving on to the second story, Destroyer by Andrew Smith. Now, personally, I think this is Andrew Smith's weakest of his 4 War Doctor stories, but being Andrew Smith, he's still one of my favourite War Doctor story writers. And this one is a really great follow-up. This time round, the Doctor has to try and continue to convince Princeps and his species to let them work with, try to save them, whilst the Time Lords are trying to prevent the Doctor from saving them because it's a bit of a lost cause. And Case and Farron eventually find a small task force of Daleks have already been hiding on this planet trying to do their thing. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting episode in that regard. It takes a bit of a twist in regards of the Daleks are actually already here as well, surprisingly for everybody else, and also the episode kind of focuses a bit on that, as well as on Veclin trying to get the Doctor off planet, and the Doctor eventually having to get back down, and ultimately deciding he can't actually save the planet. He can't save the people, so it's just him and his crew that get off world, which is a pretty good ending. Shame we couldn't take anybody at all, but in war stories, you kind of have to have lots of casualties, and you can't always have a happy ending. Sorry, it's a shame. I think this is the one I have the least to talk about. It's pretty simple, pretty effective, and works really well. Characters are pretty great, really enjoyable. Yeah. This is a pretty good one. Like I said, I think it's my least favourite of Andrew Smith's 4 War Doctor stories, but it's still a really good one. One thing I'm not so keen on is Tamazan kind of treating like Case as like a because she's a part converted Dalek, she eventually tries to have her locked away, or locked up, and I'm not sure if that's kind of countermounted or taken back a little bit, and she's kind of allowed to be on the ship a bit more in the last episode when the Doctor's talking to her, or afterwards. In fact, I'll get back to that point. I was going to make another point, but I'll get back to that. I'll move into episode 3 quickly, which is Saviour by Jonathan Morris. This is a really fun episode that details what happened before the ship tried to crash. So the Doctor, Veclin, and a character called Lance Corporal Brown arrive on this on the ship, and they've just found Case where they found on a planet, and they brought her along, and she wakes up and comes out as well to play, and eventually the Doctor realizes that the ship is actually this Dalek, because they thought it was just a scavenger ship with some scavengers trapped in trouble. But it turns out it's a trap. It's the Daleks factory thing we mentioned earlier, and these scavengers have been turned into Dalek puppets. I wonder if they're the same ones as we saw in the Stephen Moffat era, with the eyes sticking out of them, or if, like Case, they're partly robotic and converted. Kind of leaning towards maybe the second option because of Case, but I wouldn't put it past the Daleks to have used the Dalek puppets, for, as we saw in Asylum of the Daleks, and in other Stephen Moffat era Dalek stories, to be used in the Time War. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. They brought the Ogrons back for 8th Doctor Time War 2, so they could easily have had Dalek puppets in the Time War. Anyway, so the Doctor then uses Case as a way to trick the Daleks and eventually to destroy them and to have the spaceship crash. Sadly, Albert is killed, and he was quite a fun character throughout the episode, being a bit of a funny dude. He was the comic relief of the trio, and Veclin actually serves as a proper companion in this episode, as opposed to a reluctant soldier under the Doctor's orders, or forced to work with the Doctor, as we saw in the previous 2 episodes. In this episode, she actually feels like a proper companion, making Veclin an official War Doctor companion, alongside Albert and probably Case as well. So these 3 are brand new War Doctor's companions. Well, I say brand new, promoted in Veclin's case. And then after this, she just becomes a reoccurring on and off ally / acquaintance / colleague. But yeah, it's actually really fun listening to the hard, stone, cold edge Veclin having to basically act like the companion, or one of the companions in this story, and in fact over the whole series, in places where she actually has to go along with the Doctors, attempting to help the people in order to get him off the planet. In order to do her thing, she has to actually go along with his thing, and she is not liking that at all. But in this episode, she actually works as a really good companion here, and I really enjoy their relationship across all 3 episodes. This might also be my favourite portrayal of her character, both writing and performance-wise. And I also enjoy, like I said, I enjoy Albert as well as the comic relief, and Case as her own character. I really wish they would have brought her back for box set 3. Tamazan would just be like, okay, fine, Doctor, you can have her. Just make sure she doesn't attack Time Lords as best as you can. Okay, off you go. Because it feels like Case could be going on more missions with the War Doctor. It's implied at the end because she survives. Yeah, she's kind of locked away, possibly by the Time Lords, but I feel like there was the potential for more stories with her later down the line. And the next box set, Battlegrounds, hasn't got her, and I don't think she's going to be in box set 4, although at time recording, details about the story haven't been announced. It's just going to be one big 3-parter, a bit like maybe the first box set in the original series. So maybe she'll be back, maybe she'll be in that one. By the time this video comes out, we might have some answers, but if not, then we'll find out by the time the series comes out. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame that she wasn't in box set 3, but then again, box set 3 does its own kind of thing story-wise, so... But I think there is still the possibility of her to come back in later stories down the line, possibly even as a continuing companion of the War Doctor. But we'll just have to wait and see if that ever happens. Personally, Saviour is my favourite story of this season, which continues the trend from the previous box set of the final story being my favourite of the series. Personal ranking would be Consequences, then Destroyer, and then Saviour, and all 3 I personally give a 9 out of 10. I don't think there's much wrong, but I don't think any of them reach the same heights as some of the other stories, like the Eternity Cage or the Shadow Squad, with all 3 of them a solid 9 out of 10s for all 3 episodes, making this one possibly, as I mentioned up front, one of the most consecutively good box sets of the Big Finish War Doctor series, possibly even the strongest. In terms of consistency, in terms of the stories going on. And even though I've only heard it once, I would say the same when including Battlegrounds, the 3rd box set, out of the 7 released so far, although I will give more definitive opinions on Battlegrounds when we come to that review. But at this point in time, I think out of the 7 box sets released so far, this is the most consecutively good series, and it's got some of the strongest stories of the range, although there's still plenty of great ones elsewhere. And it's a very solid series. It might even be my favourite series of the War Doctor series. Certainly War Doctor Begins. I think objectively it's topped the first one, Forged in Fire, although I will personally still really enjoy that series, especially with Shadow Squad still continuing to be my favourite War Doctor story. But Warbringer, I think, is probably the strongest series of the War Doctor so far. If not this, then the last one of the John Hurt ones, Casualties of War. But I think this one this one is the one that probably just eclipses it by a smidge in terms of consistently good. But I'll make a final decision maybe later down the line about that. But I think it is definitely between those two on that. Out of the Begin series, at least, it's definitely the strongest of the 3. And yeah, it was a really fun and enjoyable watch. I will say, when I did hear it the first time, I did think it was just good. Enjoyed it. But I think I wasn't as fond on the first 2 stories as I became later down the line. But the third one, maybe I liked even more then. I think listening it to a second time has definitely helped me with my opinions on episodes 1 and 2. Maybe not so much on the third one. I always enjoyed that, and maybe actually went down instead of up. But I still really enjoyed it, and now I enjoy the whole series pretty much equally. Just that maybe it just gets better as it goes along. So some episodes will have a slightly higher place than the others, but that's mainly due for ranking purposes and which ones were what was my favourite, what was my least favourite, which was in the middle for me personally. But yeah, I think this is a really great box set and really worth checking out. A great continuation for the War Doctor and War Doctor Begins series. One other thing, I did mention I might do a ranking of the War Doctor box sets after this Warbringer one for the first 6, but I think I might now just wait until the 4th one of the Begin series is out and just do a big 8 box set ranking and rank all 3, 6, 9, 12, 24, all 24 stories. As I mentioned, I listened to the series a second time in September and recording this in September. The review is going to come out in October, and Battleground is going to follow in November. And the final box set will be out in December, so I might as well wait until early to mid next year to do the ranking of the War Doctor 1 to 8 original series and Begins series all together, all 8 box sets after the 8th one has been released and I have reviewed it. So that ranking video will, if I do that, will come out after the 8th box set instead of right after this one. And the series continues next time with the 3rd box set of Battlegrounds, which at time of recording, as I mentioned, I've only heard the series once and I wasn't entirely impressed with it as much as the first 2 series in this set. At time of recording, I think it is better than the 2nd War Doctor original series release, Infernal Devices, but I think it is one of the weaker releases in the War Doctor range so far, but my opinions could change in the review after a second listening. I do think the first story, The Keeper of Light, is another super strong story in this series, but the following 2 I wasn't as fond of, but still found really enjoyable. But maybe on a second viewing I might find those I might find those really good. So stay tuned next time for my review of the War Doctor Begins Battlegrounds. Until then, thank you so much for watching this review of the War Doctor Begins Warbringer. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.